Hello, I'm Rick Dior, and today we're going to pay homage to one of the greatest drum books of all time, and that is Jim Chapin's Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer. So this is my original book from the 1970s. It has a $5 price on there. It's probably more now. I know it's still in print. At one time I had a version of this where you could had these little pieces of rhythms, in other words paper, and you'd slide them in and out. But I can't find it. I misplaced it years ago when I moved from New York City to North Carolina. I'm sure it's in some box somewhere, but I've been looking for it for years and I can't find it. So there's another version of this book that's not in print, and that's that version. It's pretty cool. You can change up all the rhythms, and you don't really need it, but it was a neat idea. But anyway, that's the original. I think the new one has a white cover. The first printing of this was in November 1948. I started studying it when I was 11 years old, and I worked through it until I was around 15 years old. So at that age, it took me about 4 years to get through the book, and I'm sure I wasn't playing it well at that time. It's a very difficult book, and it was really the first book to deal with independence, the modern form of jazz independence. Of course, these days you have lots and lots of great books. Of course, you have the John Riley books, which are fantastic, both of those. Ed Soph, my friend Ed Soph, has a really good book. In my book, there's lots and lots of jazz independence. So, this has gone on for years and years in many different books, many different approaches. But this was the first book to really dive into that. And I still use it with students. You can never do enough of this stuff. The more, the better. So I recommend this book highly. I was honored and lucky enough to meet Jim in a clinic that I was doing, and he was also on the bill. Years and years ago, it was a PAS clinic, and I got to talk to him. Just a beautiful guy, very energetic. I felt like I could talk to him for days. And one thing we talked about was the Muller technique, which, of course, Joe Morello, who I studied with, taught that as well. But I think Jim studied with Muller while Joe did not. And Jim had a much different take on the Muller technique than I learned with Joe. His was much higher, I guess closer to the original. Morello did a little bit different version of it, which was much lower. I think Morello's was more applicable to the drum set. That's just my opinion now, so, calm down out there, some of you. But it was just a much lower approach. Jim played kind of high. He had amazing technique, but it was a higher technique, very old school kind of technique. So that can be directly applied to this book. That's my whole point here. A lot of these exercises deal with accented notes that happen very quickly with your left hand. Now, one of the things about this book, excuse me, that has been kind of a mystery or just questionable over all these years is the way that it's written. So the jazz cymbal rhythm is written, I'll put it up on the screen here, with 16th notes rather than the triplet rhythm. But it's important to understand that no two guys or gals play the cymbal rhythm the same way. Some play it really tight, like this. And some play it really open, like this. Quicker, that would sound like this. So those are the two extremes. And you could listen to any drummer. When I was a kid, I listened to lots of drummers, and even now, and you could tell who it was just by their ride cymbal pattern. Like I knew when it was Elvin, because you'd hear this. I knew when it was Max Roach, because you'd hear this. I knew it was Art Blakey because you'd hear this. And I knew when it was Philly Joe because you'd hear this. And of course, when you heard Jimmy Cobb do this, you knew right away who that was. And it goes on and on, all right? So all these drummers had a specific sound and rhythm they played with their right hand. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. That's your signature. You know, when you write out your signature, they all look different. That's okay. I tried to emulate all those guys and then come up with my own sound, and that's what you should do too. So in this book, what happens is Jim has that rhythm written like that. Don't let that throw you off. But the other thing is he has all these different rhythms under it. So he'll go from the shuffle rhythm to just straight eighth notes, the 16th notes, and so on, and triplets, of course. You should play those as written, even though the eighth notes sound like they're pretty stiff, as do the 16ths. It's a coordination test, is what it is. It's your vocabulary. So you're not going to sit there all the time and do this. I mean, you'd sound like the stiffest player ever, right, if you do that. But in certain spots, it sounds kind of cool. And lots of drummers, especially Elvin Jones, are noted for playing all kinds of different straight eighth, triplets, 16ths under cymbal pattern. So it's good to know. My first drum set teacher, a great teacher named Jack Winters, really my only drum set teacher, because I didn't study drum set with Morello, he liked to make everything lock in. So he would play those straight eighths like this. Instead of. And, you know, of course I went along with it because I was, 11 years old. I'm not going to argue with my teacher. But now that I see, what he was thinking, he felt like it probably would have sounded, or as a student, I would have sounded all wrong if I learned that. But you should do the book as written. And of course, if you do it like he wanted me to do it, the first chapter, the shuffle rhythms, sounds exactly like the second chapter, the straight eighths. It's the same exact thing. Just more of the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide this series into at least 2 parts. We'll see how long it is once I get in there and see how much I recorded. And we'll go through the first part of the book, which is basically you're playing this with your foot and your hi-hat, your bass drum and your hi-hat. So you're playing the bass drum, not too loud, and you're playing the hi-hat on 2 and 4 for now. And then all the exercises are done with the hands. The left hand is playing what's written, the right hand is playing the cymbal pattern. And then in the second part, I'm going to do the rest of the book, which is more of a bebop style, where you're playing, hand and foot coordination, which can get pretty difficult. By the end of the book, it's very, very challenging. So that's how we're going to break this up. Now, the book starts on page 4, at least the old one does, with the shuffle section. And Jim puts a key to the right where the hands lock in, which is very, very helpful, especially for a young student to see that. So I can't put any of this on the screen because it's a copyright infringement, but I'm sure, many of you have this book. And if you don't, you should have it. It's one of those classics that you should definitely own, and it's not expensive either. So the tempo I like to use for this first section is quarter note equals 70. Or 140, but you're going to put your metronome on 70, so you're playing 2 and 4, and that's really important to play 2 and 4 when you're doing these. I don't like doing them on the quarter note on all 4. So the first exercise would sound like this. So you see how the metronome's on 2 and 4. Now, for the purposes of you hearing everything through this series, I'm going to be playing my snare drum, my left hand, a little bit louder than I normally would, just to make sure you're getting all those rhythms clearly. Normally what Jim does in the book, which is kind of ingenious, is he does all of the coordination exercises, several pages of those, and then he'll have little etudes. In this case, they'll be on page 8 and 9, where you take what you've learned and put them together into these little pieces. And he quotes a lot of these tunes. I know Billy's Bounce is in here. I'll point that out when we get there. The C Jam Blues is in here. There's several tunes of the day that you can actually hear the melodies as rhythms. Now, the only other thing I do that he doesn't talk about in the book is I do slur all the ties as buzzes like this. And that's something I've worked on with all my students, so whenever there's a tie to make a note longer, I will buzz that. And I suspect he might have done that too, but it doesn't really talk about it in the book, in the intro, or anywhere else. So let's get started. What I'll do is I'll play each exercise 4 times and go right to the next one. And when there's a page turn, I'll just play some time, turn the page, and keep going. But I will stop before the etudes. So here we go with page 4. So those are the exercises in the first section, the shuffle section. Now let's go to the etudes. So we're going to do these at 2 tempos. The first tempo will be quarter note equals 140, and then I'll go up to quarter note equals 180, and I'll do each exercise twice, all right? So here's the first tempo, quarter note equals 140. Now we'll play them a little faster for you. So we'll boost the metronome up to 180. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you see a little of that Mahler technique with the left hand there. Okay, that's how I recommend using that. So then we get to page 10, and we'll do this at 2 tempos as well. We'll go back to 140. Let's try that. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we'll do them at the fast tempo. Quarter note equals 180. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the end of that chapter.